20, 25-30, 45-40, 45-30, 25-20, 15, 10, 5, end zone. Ladies and gentlemen, 94 yards. Touchdown! Tyson, he is the baddest man in the NFL, and he just took her to the house.
All right, Mike Keith, the voice of the Titans, joining us tonight. Mike, what a pleasure. Thank you so much for joining us tonight.
It's my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
All right, and first of all, I want to ask you about your time here on Rocky Top, especially at WGK. You're a WHK alum. You're the sports director here on Rock Soul Sports. Me and Nick and Andrew, we're all sports directors. We're honored to be a sports director because of what you did. And tell a little bit of your time here at WGK.
So I came to the University of Tennessee in September 1986, and my third day on campus, I came by the radio station, and they hired me, and I ended up being the sports director there for 5 quarters. That's before we were on semesters. So I was actually there for, I guess 5 quarters would have been about a year and a half total, and did all sorts of things there and got to cover football games and basketball games and the Lady Vols with Pat Summitt. It was an incredible experience, and it's one of the reasons that I've tried to stay as involved as I could, because WUTK is the biggest, most important reason I am where I am today. Getting that start, getting that ability to work with good people, to learn. And I mean, let's face it, you guys all know this. You cover big-time sports when you go to a place like Tennessee. You cover the Vols and the Lady Vols and the SEC, and it gives you an opportunity to show what you can do. And for me, it was very special. And, that was this fall, that will have been 35 years ago.
Nicholas Hill, our core sports director.
It's an honor to get to talk to you, sir.
Thank you.
So, looking back at your time here at UT and all the sporting events you covered, is there one particular sporting event or game that stands out to you that you covered while you were here at WTK?
Yes, unfortunately. Tennessee was coming off the Sugar Bowl in the Sugar Bowl season in 1985, which for people of my era, it was the golden era of UT sports, because it was the thing that convinced me that I was definitely coming to Tennessee. I was in New Orleans on January 1st, 1986, when the Vols upset Miami and had the really special night. Well, they returned most everybody in 1986, with the exception of the quarterback, and people thought that it was going to be a great year, and it did not turn out to be a great year. The Vols got off to a 2-5 start, which was disastrous. And the game, one of the first games that I covered, is Tennessee lost to Army on a blocked punt in the last few minutes of the ball game. And it was horrifying. And that was one of my first experiences going into a locker room and, covering something after it had ended where it was tough. How do you handle that? Because you're thinking it's going to be a win ahead for the majority of the game, and then they lose because of the block punt late in the game. And then flip that to the next year, 1987. So that team rallied to win its last 5 games, won the Liberty Bowl over Minnesota, and then in 1987 got off to a fantastic start, upset Auburn in what was or actually tied Auburn, as it turned out. Auburn, that ended up being a tie game, but really had a great year, won 10 games, went 10-2-1. And so I got to cover a lot of fun things that year. So I saw sort of both sides of it, the agony of defeat and the thrill of victory all in that time.
Driving fine?
Yeah, Mike, again, appreciate you joining us again today. I want to shift the focus on Tennessee today because, you got to cover them in their glory days, man. A lot of fans here have not been happy with obviously the recent success, but here we go. We have another kind of rebuild to this team. We have a new AD and Danny White, a new head coach in Josh Heupel. What are your thoughts on the athletic director and the head coach? What have you heard from both of these guys, just from other people? And do you think that these two guys can fix this Tennessee program and kind of this mess that we've been in here in the last couple of years?
Well, let's start with Danny White. Danny White is not somebody I know, and I don't know who the up-and-comers are in college athletics. So what did I do? I called my friends who do this for a living, who work in athletic departments in different places around the country. And in talking to them, unanimously, they were dumbfounded that Tennessee was able to hire Danny White. Danny White is a superstar. He's an up-and-comer. It was thought that he was going to have his choice of any job that he wanted when it was time to leave Central Florida. And people weren't surprised that Tennessee got him because Tennessee's been down. They were surprised that Tennessee was able to just get him, period, because within a matter of months, this is somebody who would have been able to go wherever he wanted. And the jobs were going to be there. If he didn't want the Tennessee job, he could have waited 3 months and there would have been something else there for him. So I think if you're talking about Danny White, from the people that I talk to and trust, this is a 5-star hire. Like Josh Heupel. I like the idea that Josh Heupel went to Oklahoma, coached at Oklahoma, because there's an understanding of Josh Heupel of expectations. You know, one of the tough things about the Tennessee job for a lot of people is that Vol fans expect to be as good as Alabama every year. And that's been the expectation for nearly 100 years. That hasn't changed. In spite of the fact that we have been down for a period of time, we still expect to compete at that level. Because Josh Heupel has the experience as he did as a player and a coach at Oklahoma, and, you know, in part because he got fired at Oklahoma as an assistant coach, I think he fully gets the level of expectation walking into Tennessee. And as you've heard him interviewed after the press conference, you've heard consistently none of this, oh, give us time, oh, it's going to be hard, oh, I need patience. He said, listen, we've got a plan, we're going to work. And I like that. I like somebody who has been in the big time. Josh Heupel has been in the big time. The second thing about Josh Heupel is he's going to appeal to skill position players. If you want to throw it, if you want to run it, if you want to catch it, if you want to make the NFL as a left tackle, you're going to want to play in his offense. And the game today is about offense. So I've been very, very pleased with Josh Heupel. It's one of those that each day that goes by, I'm more and more excited because I think he fits us right now, and I think he understands where we are right now.
Jackson Williams?
Yes, thank you again for coming on the show tonight. I want to shift back a little bit to early in your career. What was it like working with somebody like John Ward so early in your career? And what did he teach you about calling a game that has helped you throughout your long career with the Titans?
So John Ward hired me when I was 19. I was still the sports director at WUTK, and he was pretty hard on me. And I know now he was hard on me because he was trying to get the best out of me. And for many years, I was just terrified of him, just scared to death. But what I learned that I apply in how I broadcast, two things. First of all, his level of preparation was unmatched. And I try to get to that sort of level with how I prepare on a daily basis. I'm working every day on draft stuff right now, trying to learn the backstories and, you know, figure out who these guys are as people, just beyond what they can do as football players and what their stats are. That's what John Ward taught me. The other thing, too, is John Ward taught me that you have to be yourself and that you have to do what you do. I wanted to be like John Ward. Unfortunately, I'm not. I'm not that smart. I don't sound that good. I'm not that erudite in terms of how I conduct myself. I'm me. And the difference in me is, okay, I have a lot more energy than John Ward did. I played football, baseball, basketball. I played a variety of sports through high school. And so John didn't. So I know how it feels to be a player. I know how it feels to cover that opening kickoff. So that's something that I bring to it that makes me different from him. And what he made me realize in that way was different is not necessarily better or worse. His style was not necessarily better than my style. It's he does his thing, I do my thing, and you have to do what you do to the best of my ability. Now, I'll never be as good as John Ward. I could do this for 100 more years, and I'll never be as good as what he was. I'll never sound as good. I'll never be as unique. I had to accept that. A lot of counseling to get me to that point, but I had to accept that. And you've just got to do what you do. He taught me that. And by the time that I finished working for John in 1998, and I left right before the national championship, that was brilliant, right? I went to work for the Oilers then, about 4 months before the 98 football season began. But by that time, I won't say we were close because John was very private, but we had a very different relationship. He had respect for what I did. He teased me instead of being hard on me. He looked to me to be one of sort of the leaders of the group in terms of my approach. And I carried that on to the Titans. And so to become a play-by-play guy and sort of head up a broadcast at a young age, I was able to do that through my experience through him. I owe so much to John Ward. More, he and my dad would be the two people that I would owe my career to the most.
What a testimony. What a testimony. Again, we are having the honor to have Mike Keith, the voice of the Tennessee Titans, here on this Wednesday Night Rockfall Sports that is sponsored by Fieldhouse Social, 2525 University Commons Way. Great place to hang out, great place to get some great food and drinks as well. Joseph, your question?
So the Titans and the Vols are kind of in similar. Well, they were in similar situations. With the whole coordinator search, Titans have obviously filled those roles as of now. But when we look at the Vols, from your experience, here at WTK and with the Titans, what do you think is going through Josh Heupel's mind when he's searching for the right guy to head both sides of the ball?
That's a great question, Joseph, because I think that's, the style of offense he runs demands a very different style of defensive coordinator. And so you guys all know what he does is big time up tempo. He does run the football, which is surprising for a lot of the up tempo stuff. His run games have always been very good, which you have to have in the SEC. It's been proven if you throw every down in the SEC, you will get beat. You must run the football, and he will do that. But your defense is going to have to be ready to be back on the field very quickly. It's going to be a defense that probably has to play a lot of plays, and it's going to be tested in a different way. It's not traditional. It has to be a little more bend but don't break. Let's get the ball back for the offense, and let's be able to play at a high tempo because we're going to have to be right back out there after our offense. So he's thinking about that, Joseph, and I think that's a big deal. The other thing he's thinking about, too, is recruiting and recruiting staff and how you stock certain positions are largely based on where guys fit into the staff overall. For example, a lot of times your linebacker coach is one of your better recruiters. So if that's the case, how does a linebacker coach who can coach the scheme they're going to run fit to be one of your top recruiters? Those are things that always matter. Your wide receiver coach on offense a lot of times, or your tight end coach is generally a good recruiter. You have to have people who can be away from campus at certain times, even while you're preparing for a game, because they're on the road trying to find the players. And let's face it, that's what the SEC is all about. So in looking for his coordinator, he's looking for somebody who can coach the style of defense that he wants and can help him assemble a staff on defense that can not only do the same in terms of coaching, but also can help this team recruit a bunch of good ball players. And, there are going to be a bunch in this state over the next 2 or 3 years. It is an unusually strong haul, and it gives Coach Heupel what I think is an unusual opportunity to get this thing turned around more quickly than what would normally be the case.
Again, we're talking to Mike Keith, the voice of the Titans. Nick Hill.
Yeah, so I kind of want to pivot a little bit over towards the Titans. Obviously, you're the voice of them. They've had a good string of seasons recently. I know Joseph Jackson and I were all big Titans fans, so we've been excited with how the team has been doing over the past few years. Obviously, last year they went to the AFC title game. This year they finally won the AFC South for the first time in 12 years. Just when you look at where the Titans were at the beginning of this decade, when they were struggling with guys like Jake Locker and Ken Wisenhunt, and then they bring in Marcus Mariota and things start to turn around. Just what do you think was the main reason why the Titans started to find success in the middle of this decade through the end of it?
First of all, Nick, was ownership. When Amy Adams Strunk took over from her brother-in-law, Tommy Smith, she made a commitment to spend a bunch of money. And in doing so, she has upgraded facilities. She's added a ton of personnel. She's upgraded all of the technology. And that showed this year when we, went through all the things, COVID, and had a lot of the difficulties that we had. Because our technology and our IT department was pristine, we were able to hang in there. It's one of the reasons we won the division. The other thing she did is she hired really good people. She hired John Robinson as a general manager, and we have a philosophy now of what we're looking for. Certainly you don't hit on every draft pick and you don't hit on every free agent signing, but if you have a high batting average, which John Robinson does overall, if you make good decisions overall, you give yourself stability. And then 3 years ago, we hired Mike Vrabel, who's an outstanding coach. He mirrors John's philosophy. And then 2 years ago, we added Ryan Tannehill at the quarterback position. So what we have right now is we've got a controlling owner who is big time. We have one of the better general managers in the National Football League. We've got one of the brightest young coaches in the NFL. And we've got a guy who's been a top 10 quarterback in his time as our starter. Those are the things that, that have brought us back. And I can draw some parallels, Nick, to Tennessee, because I see really good things out of the president, Randy Boyd, and the chancellor, Dondi Plowman. They've gone out and hired Danny White. Josh Heupel is in there now. Now the next thing for us is we got to figure out who the quarterback is, right? I think when you get all of those things right at any level of football, from leadership all the way down, and start at the quarterback position, you're getting good quarterback play, you have a chance.
Jackson?
Yeah, you touched on this answering Nick's question. I was just wondering what a game day was like for you this season with all of the COVID-19 restrictions. You normally have a lot of access to players. I'm sure that was a little restricted a little bit. What was the game day like for you?
Jackson, that's a great question. And this will take a second, but I think you'll enjoy the story. So the NFL went with a tier system in regards to how it would handle COVID. And in the tier system, the players were tier 1, the people who worked directly with the players were tier 2, and then the rest of us were tier 3. And that meant we couldn't get anywhere near the people who were tier 1 or tier 2. So I was tier 3. I had the opportunity at some point early in the season to move to tier 2, but that would mean that I could not be around the guys that I work with on Titans Radio, because the majority of them don't work for the team. And due to that fact, I couldn't come in contact with them. So we made a decision, and I would stay tier 3 all year, which meant I could have no contact with players or coaches in person. Anything that I did with the head coach, Mike Vrabel, was by Zoom. Our radio shows, our TV shows, our production meetings. I was never with Mike Vrabel in person. And the Titans and the Saints were the only 2 teams that traveled radio to away games. The other 30 teams called it virtually from the studio. So every game day was totally different on the road. At home, they shifted our booth down 2 positions because they gave the coaching staff our booth to call the game so that they could social distance. They gave them an extra booth. At home, it was no problem. It was just business as usual. But on the road, man, flying Southwest, flying Delta, renting cars, staying in hotels away from the team, driving straight to the airport after calling a night game and staying up all night. I hadn't pulled an all-nighter since I was a UT student. It was, in some ways, it was a great experience because it certainly made you appreciate all of the comforts that you had. The other area it was a great experience is it made you have to sort of imagine things in a different way. And there are things that we learned this year that we will take forward about how we can do things more efficiently. On the other hand, when you travel with the team, one of the great advantages that you have is game ends, you get on the bus, you get on the plane, you're home, you can work on the plane. When you travel commercially, you have to wait on the plane. Sometimes you can't leave right after the game ends. You got to wait till the next morning. You lose a lot of time. And so it was a stressful season getting everything done, but glad we went to all 8 away games. I was nervous because I was afraid of COVID like everybody else is. I'm not a young guy anymore, so I had to be cognizant of that. But, I was masking up and washing my hands every 2 seconds and trying to do all the right things. And the good Lord took care of us. That's all I can say.
Draven Fine, our analyst.
Yeah, Mike, I want to talk more about the coaching. Titans didn't have a defense coordinator last year. They had Mike Vrabel kind of calling the defense. They promote Shane Bowen. They also promote Todd Downing, who's replacing Arthur Smith, becoming the head coach over in Atlanta. What do we know about this new offense coordinator and new defense coordinator? Do you think these guys are going to be able to continue the offensive pace that this team has been on? And do you think Shane Bowen can bring a little bit of a different element to this defense that took a pretty big step back this past season?
They did. Yeah. Draven, there's no doubt the defense wasn't good enough. And I don't know that the offense can be as good as it was in 2020. I just don't. Because that's a record-setting offense for the Tennessee Titans. No Titans offense has ever been close to doing what this offense did. But it's a little bit like Ryan Tannehill, okay? Everybody asked me when we signed Ryan Tannehill to the contract, they would say, can Ryan Tannehill match the numbers that he had in 2019? And I said, no. And they're like, well, that's pretty negative. But my point was his numbers were so off the charts that you can't expect that. Instead, what you say is if he can even get close, we're in good shape. And that's what he did. I mean, Tannehill had a great year. He did a great job. His numbers weren't exactly what they were in 2019, but they didn't have to be. Well, so if the offense is even close to what it was in 2020 this fall, we'll be just fine. The biggest area where we can make improvement is defense. Todd Downing is going to be a perfect fit on the offense. The majority of that staff stays together. I like that flow. Defensively, I think we have a chance to do some good things with Shane Bowen because now he's in charge. I think Vrabel will take a little bit of a step back. Ryan Crow is going to coach the outside linebackers, which means Shane doesn't have to worry about doing that. He was trying to do double duty. So my belief is it's going to end up working out real well. But the other thing, too, is you're going to see us, in my opinion, make a number of personnel changes on defense. We weren't good enough. The biggest reason that we weren't good enough is we didn't have a pass rush. We've got to go out and find pass rushers. And I think we've got to find corners as well. We've got to strengthen ourselves at the corner position.
Joseph Bonanno?
You can't talk about these new coaches without talking about the old ones. And I think one of the biggest coaching contributions to last year was Arthur Smith. And obviously he's now the head coach at the Atlanta Falcons. And personally, I have seen nothing negative about Arthur Smith coming from this Titans organization. It just seems like every player and coach respects him and thanks him for what he did for this offense. Being close to the team as you are, what has kind of been the mindset around Arthur Smith and his new job and him leaving to continue his career?
Well, selfishly, we're very disappointed because we hoped that he could stay one more year before anybody noticed how good he was. But I'm very happy for him, and I think Atlanta has made a fantastic hire. Arthur, if you don't know his background, Arthur's dad is Fred Smith, the man who founded FedEx. So Arthur's family has a couple of bucks. They're doing okay. Well, when Arthur came to work for us, he was a defensive quality control coach, doing all the grub work, making no money, staying up all night, helping formulate the plans against the opposition. And he worked his way up through the ranks. 2 years ago at this time, when we promoted him, everybody and their brother ripped the hire. Oh, this is terrible. And we kept telling them, we said, you don't know Arthur like we know Arthur. Arthur was ready. And now here he goes to Atlanta, and everybody's saying that Atlanta's made a home run hire, and what are we going to do without him? It hurts. You can't lose good people and it not hurt. It's going to take some time. Will Todd Downing be as good as Arthur Smith? I hope so, but I don't know, because I think Arthur is that kind of special. But I think Todd's special in a different way, being that he's already been a coordinator once before. And he's another good guy with a good personality. The players feel like they really connect with him. Arthur had very much an open door policy with Ryan Tannehill and the guys on offense. They would talk about things extensively in terms of saying, hey, Arthur, I like this play better than I like this play. Or I like this formation better than I like this formation. And pro football, the coach is the coach. He's the final word on things. But these are all grown men. And so being able to have a discussion and being able to take what they say into account is a big deal. And Arthur did that well, and I think Todd will do the exact same thing. But, yeah, we're going to miss Arthur Smith. Life will go on. We'll push forward. But he's a special coach and a special human being, and I like him very much. I think he's going to be wildly successful with the Falcons.
Nicholas Hill?
Yes. So kind of shifting a little bit more over towards the Super Bowl, obviously. And before we get into this particular matchup, I know you've gotten to call one, and obviously that was, I guess 21 years ago. I was only a toddler. I don't remember it. I don't think anyone on the show remembers it. But just kind of tell me about what it was like calling that game. I know it obviously had a very heartbreaking ending, but just outside of that, just what was it like calling the Super Bowl? I mean, because I can only imagine because I know that was like one of your first seasons. It might have been the first season.
First season.
Yeah, that you were an NFL announcer and you're calling the Super Bowl. Just what was that like?
Crazy. I mean, nothing short of crazy. What was really wild about it is, so the Music City Miracle game happens. 8 days later, we go to Indianapolis and we beat the Colts. And then the next weekend, the next Sunday, we go to Jacksonville and win the AFC Championship. That was the late game. So we got back to Nashville like 9 o'clock. We go to the stadium. 40,000 people are in the stadium. And we have this pep rally, this wild thing. And then we go back to the office to work because the Super Bowl didn't have a week off in between it and the championship games. It was immediately the next week. So we went to Atlanta the next day. I was in the office till 4 o'clock in the morning, Sunday night / Monday morning. And we get in, we board the plane the next afternoon, fly to Atlanta. We get there, and the guy who produces our broadcast, Larry Stone, and he's my partner in terms of putting together the pregame, postgame, all those sorts of things. He would host all the pregame stuff, but I would help him gather material for it. He becomes deathly ill. I mean, like the sickest of his adult life. He's in the bed for 3 days. And so Wednesday, Thursday, Friday into Saturday, I'm running around with a gigantic Marantz tape recorder interviewing people for the 5-hour pregame show that we've got to do because we're carrying the Super Bowl. That was a great break for me because had I had all week to sit and think about calling the Super Bowl, I think I'd have just choked. But I didn't realize until about 25 minutes before the game kicked off sort of the magnitude of what we were about to do. It's not that I didn't know. It's that I just hadn't had time to think about it. And I think in that way, the good Lord protected me because if I had gotten in my own head, there's no telling what I would have done. It's a great thrill and an honor to have called one. Many announcers who are much better than I'll ever be will never get that opportunity. I'm going to call another one, though. And I'm going to call one where the Titans win. That's going to happen. Write it down.
All right. Thank you so much, Mike Keith, voice of the Tennessee Titans and former WTK sports director. And, by the way, is a very responsibility for me and Nick and Andrew to be the sports director here because we're carrying your legacy. We're trying to carry what you built here at WTK Volunteer Radio. So we have you on the show is an honor. And so real quick, your analysis on this Super Bowl 55, Tampa Bay Buccaneers and the Kansas City Chiefs. What do you expect from this game?
I'm going to tell you something. I'm going to shock you guys. I'm going to pick the Bucs. They're hot. They've won 7 in a row. Brady's playing well. Brady's had a week off. I like the fact that it might rain. I think that may slow Kansas City down. Remember, they saw Kansas City on November the 29th. They saw Tyreek Hill go 13 catches for 269, so they have seen the Chiefs' offense at its best. I think the Bucs are going to pull the upset. I don't know why. I can't believe I'm picking against Patrick Mahomes. I can't believe it.
What do you think about the whole COVID situation with the Chiefs?
It doesn't – what I was reading just before I came on with you, it sounds like they're actually okay. It sounds like they've got some – like Kilgore, they've got a close contact situation, but if he stays okay, it sounds like he may be able to play. A lot of this is stuff that the league learned from our COVID outbreak and then from Baltimore's COVID outbreak. Cleveland was in a situation where it looked like they were headed toward that sort of thing, but the league, from what they learned about our situation, was able to mitigate it. I mean, it's remarkable that we got this season in. It's remarkable. The biggest blessing of all is that, we played 256 games and then all of the playoffs. We're going to get it in. So I'm knocking on wood for everybody, but it looks like Kansas City and Tampa are going to be okay, and that's a good thing.
That's true. I mean, we had a NFL podcast a couple hours ago, and there's one thing I mentioned. I feel like having an NFL season, I remember back in April and May last year, everybody was saying that football is not going to happen, NFL, and it happened. I feel like, that's one of the things that, and you lived through it. I feel like, would you say it was one of the seasons that you most, feel like that you feel like you got it in because it looked like it would have happened? Like, what?
The whole thing was remarkable. I mean, so I'll tell you this story. Do I have time? Do I have time to tell you something?
Oh, yeah, yeah, of course we have time.
Okay.
You go ahead.
So here's what's funny. Our first game is in Denver, Monday Night Football. We get to Denver and we have to get to the stadium early because just a lot of things that we're told to get to the stadium 2 hours earlier than normal because there are protocols and procedures. And remember, there was no preseason. So we didn't know how all this would work. So we get to the stadium, and they have set up those electronic thermometers outside a tent. So when you walk in, you have to answer all these questions, and then you have to get in front of the electronic thermometer, and it scans you and gives your temperature. You guys have seen those. So I was the first one up. I go walking up, and I'm standing in front of the electronic thermometer. It scans me, and it says my temperature is 106.7. It's like, whoa, 106.7. Basically, I'm near death at that point, according to this thermometer, right? And it's like, no, that's not right. And then a guy from the NFL office, one of the security people, walks up, and his temperature is 107.1. So what they had done is they had put the thermometers outside on the pavement, outside of this tent. Of course, it's 90 degrees in September, and what's happened is they're not registering right. So we had to wait 30 minutes while they figured out what to do. Because, I mean, they can't let us in the stadium if you're 107 or 106.7, even if they think that's wrong. And the whole thing just ended up being like a comedy routine, but we were patient because we knew for everybody, we're glad to be here. We're trying to get through this situation. Everybody's doing the best they can. And everybody's kind of having a little bit of a chuckle because you're like, okay, this is what it's going to be. And it was that way all year. So we go to call the last game of the season in the last road game of the season in Houston. They set us up, not in the press box. There's no room for us in the press box. They set us up on the other side of the stadium in a suite. Well, the suite was great. I mean, they brought us food. I mean, it was just first class. But there are a couple issues. First of all, because we're on the other side of the stadium from the press box, if you watch the TV feed, it's backward. So when the official goes to make his calls, for example, he's making the holding call and his back is to us. So if we watch a monitor at all, then what ends up happening is we're seeing everything reversed, which is weird. So you almost can't look at the monitor. The other thing they did that day at NRG Stadium is they opened the roof. It was a 3:25 Central Time game. So right at the end of the first half, the sun is going down. And at that point, the sun is directly in our eyes. So for the last 2 minutes of the first half, we can't even really see the field, right? Well, then what happens? I don't know if any of you guys are from the Central Time Zone, but what happens after 5 o'clock on January 3rd? The sun goes down. There is no sun. Well, where they have us in these suites, there are no lights. So we can't see our papers. We can see the field. The field's lit up, of course, but the suite itself has no lights. There's no light to turn on. There's nothing. So we can't see our rosters. We can't see our cue sheets for commercials. We can't see anything. So from the 106.7 temperature to no lights and being blinded and looking at the game backwards, that was our season. Everything that you can imagine in between. And I'm so thankful for it and so blessed that we were able to do it. And it'll be a chapter in the book at some point when there is a book. But that's what you learn when I was there. Everything is not perfect when you call a high school game. Everything is not perfect when you call a minor league baseball game or an SEC baseball game or whatever. But the things that I was able to do there at WUTK and the opportunities that I started getting from WUTK prepared me for what we went through this year. You learn to adapt, and all those basics that you learn, you use them in a year like this when you're somebody my age, and you're so thankful that somebody like Benny Smith and that department and all of those people were teaching you how to do these things the right way, because it gets you through when everything's not perfect. Listen, normally calling an NFL game is the most perfect thing you can do. You have a great seat, you have all the best equipment, you have all kinds of information. It's a lot easier than calling a high school football game. This year, not so much, and I'm thankful I had a chance to live through it years ago.
And real quick, I had to ask, you mentioned the Houston game. What went through your mind when you call that last play. You know, a lot of, you know, I remember Joseph and Nick, you know, Jackson, you know, our Titans crew kind of, you know, went ballistic. How was your feeling when that play happened?
Where were you guys watching?
I was from home, and
Okay.
I actually recorded my live reaction to the kick, and I sent it in the group chat. And as soon as I watched it go in, I think I ran all around my house, screaming at the top of my lungs. My dogs were barking. It was just absolute chaos.
Yeah, sounds about the same for me. I was also at home watching with my father, and man, we were on the edge of our seats. But man, when he hit that last kick and it bounced in, man, that was what an insane finish. I mean, that whole second half with Deshaun Watson just going up and down, it was a stomach twister. But man, what a finish to that game.
Jackson.
Yeah, I watched it home as well, but my mind was already gone when Tannehill threw that laser to AJ right to set up the kick right before that.
Yeah.
And I was listening to you because, you know, since I'm a Jets fan, I took a step backwards, and I always like to listen to the radio because, you know, it's kind of a different perspective, you know. So I was scrubbing to find you when, you know, I was listening to your call, and that was one of the most memorable moments for NFL season for me was listening to your call on that play. That was fantastic.
Well, thank you. For me, you know, the funny part is the A.J. Brown catch and the field goal were right in front of us. And sometimes there are things that you can't see because of your angle and you have to wait. And sometimes there are things that you can see. And so when I saw it, I saw the kick go through, and I could tell he had made it, and I could see the reaction of the two officials nodding that, yes, they were going to call it good. And, you know, every once in a while, gentlemen, it is much better to be lucky than good. And in that situation, I was lucky, and the Titans were lucky. And, you know, the whole second half, when you get to call somebody like Deshaun Watson, even though he's on the other team, I mean, that's great theater. I mean, if he's the villain in our movie, he's Hans Gruber from Die Hard. I mean, he's a great villain, and he's not a villain. But you know what I'm saying is when you're telling a story, if both sides are trading punches that way, that's fun. That's why you love the NFL, because every week you get to see not only Ryan Tannehill and A.J. Brown and Derrick Henry and Jeffrey Simmons and, you know, that whole group, but you get to see somebody's on the other side who are very special. Fun.
All right, Mike Keith, the voice of the Tennessee Titans. We truly appreciate you coming to this special Wednesday night edition of Rock Salt Sports. You know, we hope to carry your legacy here on 90.2 The Rock, and we wish you good luck, you know, and we're very honored to have you here.
I got to go have some of that wood fire pizza with you guys. I'm going to come up there. We're going to do that.
All right. Yeah. There's